Hey everybody, this is Perch. I said I would review these comics, so here goes. I had a chance to read The Fall of the House of X #1 by Jerry Duggan and Lucas Wernick. The original House of X was drawn by Pepe Larraz, and he does do the main cover for this one, but otherwise was likely busy with Big Game. The art is more or less fine. The title is listed as Krakoa has just begun to fight. Mutant kind has never had a greater fall. From the highs of Krakoa, their own glorious nation, a place where they were safe and happy, to the lowest of lows. Outlawed, hunted, killed, most of their kind missing or dead, and now one of their greatest leaders, Cyclops, is on trial facing a death penalty. Ready or not, the time has come for the X-Men to make their final stand against the forces that have struck them low. The day is now. The place is here. The tale of the House of Xavier built will long be told, and few will forget this darkest chapter. What I'm reminded of most is 4 years ago, around the same time, as the X titles were trying to basically kill time before Hickman's run. We had a number of really strange issues from Matt Rosenberg that felt like someone within editorial was just pissed off and turning in scripts that were completely out of character and oddly reminiscent of a snuff film. Characters like Wolfsbane were randomly killed off, and none of it seemed to matter. It was clear to everyone reading it that these titles were about to be shuffled, and what you're reading was really just an attempt not to have a missing X title during a month. In Fall of House of X #1, we don't have the random meaningless deaths yet, but characters are written so strangely that it's hard to reconcile this with any previous incarnation of X-Men characters, as speeches that feel like tweets from Twitter activists are randomly inserted into the characters' mouths. Do you want to see Colossus throwing henchmen into Wolverine's blades at fatal force, and then make jokes about what the move should be called? Nightcrawler just casually killing people? The big bad of the Hickman era, Nimrod, is defeated in 2 panels by being spit on. Cyclops not defending himself in trial because he doesn't want to give Orcus talking points. You know, it's easy to dismiss this book as just fanfic, but no fan would actually write this. With the looming reboot of the X universe under Brevoort 6 months away, this feels more like someone writing the equivalent of salting the earth by doing as much damage as humanly possible to the X-Men property. The story has the depth of Facebook posts designed to entertain for seconds before someone moves on to videos of Russian traffic accidents or ads for a mobile game involving a king being slowly murdered by puzzle blocks. This story builds nowhere, but it wants you to believe you're reading an epic struggle based on the core principles of human rights. And maybe that's the big problem with the Krakoa era when all is said and done. You know, if you're keeping track at home, the current status quo of the X-Men is that they have obtained celebrity status around the world, are in possession of their own tropical island and currency, live in a luxury treehouse in Central Park. They are immortal and cannot be harmed or killed. They host an annual costume party patterned off the ultra-rich celebrity-attended Met Gala, manage their own version of the CIA, own the largest pharmaceutical company in the world and possibly the universe, inhabit and in many cases command multiple magical realms, and they possess the entire planet of Mars. Now, granted, in the last 6 months, Orcus has waged a disinformation war and turned the people of Earth against the X-Men. Somehow. This, weirdly, has about as much depth as Tom King's current Wonder Woman run, which is doing the exact same thing. But the challenge is this. In order to make this story work, we're asked to believe that mutants are a persecuted race and that they're in constant danger from fascists and bigots who wish to take away their rights. It's meant to be an analog for racism and bigotry against the LGBTQ community, but the problem is, in this fantasy world, the repressed and persecuted have everything they could ever wish for already and infinite power. It's hard to make a story about persecution work when you write the persecuted as popular, successful, immortal, and perfect in every way. It's also hard to make the story work when the persecutors, in this case Orcus, are written to be bumbling, stupid morons who are easily defeated. Members of Orcus are routinely shown as general thugs who are quickly murdered by Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and others. The persecuted joke as they chop up their enemies and say platitudes like, "It's not too late to turn away from hate," and tell all the murderers in red that anybody aligned with fascism will die squirming under my metal foot. You don't want to believe that this is all just an attempt to get at Trump, but the fact that we're using red MAGA hats as the indicator of Orcus makes it a little bit hard not to believe that's at least somewhat of the motivation here. There is a good story to be had from all this around the hubris and arrogance of individuals who believe they're the heroes of the story while simultaneously brutally murdering their opponents. That the label of persecuted no longer works when you have your own island, government, money, planet, and powers that place you far superior to your aggressors. That ultimately calling yourself persecuted is highly disrespectful to the plight of others who have none of the luxuries that the X-Men have. And here, perhaps we get another truth to this series. As a reflection of the current culture war in America, perhaps this is a highly fitting storyline. We see news headlines right now of an actress from a Netflix series complaining about being misgendered to a minimum wage Delta employee. We don't see headlines about people of all races or genders starving in low-income spots within a first-world country. Right now, members of the Navajo Reservation, as well as many Indian tribes, struggle with having running water. But there are no trending Twitter topics on that. Instead, we're hearing about what Nikki Haley said about the Civil War and how Mark Hamill feels about what she said. This is what people focus on. There is absolutely homophobia present in the world today. The people who have to worry about and protect are not the multi-million-dollar celebrity influencers who have infinite options and resources at their disposal. This is, in effect, why the current state of the X-Men title is so bizarre. Perhaps in the end, this X-Men series is a great analog for showcasing selfish, petty people who have achieved everything they could ever want, but it's still not enough for them. They still want to wear the label of being the victim and being discriminated against. Never mind that hanging out in a tiki bar on a tropical island is a pretty far journey from living in the sewers under New York or in an abandoned town in Australia, as previous status quos of the X-Men had. The characters in this book scream that they are victims of bigotry, but that fight hasn't been earned in the slightest. The comics for some time now have taken every opportunity to show that the characters are superior in every possible way. Now we are meant to believe that in the course of a few issues they are fighting for their lives against a negative PR campaign waged by giant robots, a Mr. Sinister clone, and MODOK? You're seriously losing a PR campaign against MODOK? In a 2-page statement in the comic from Cyclops, who doesn't mount a defense because he doesn't want to provide fodder for the Orcus propagandists, he says, "I wish you peace, unless you're one of the people, or artificial intelligences, that wishes harm upon my family. If you're one of those souls, then I suggest you change your heart, if you have one." The statement comes a few pages before we learn the X-Men, or Polaris at least, is letting the Brood, the alien creatures, loose on Earth as they go to war. Now, in fairness to all this, Jerry Duggan, the writer of this comic, also gave us X-Men Green, which somehow tried to pull off that heroes can stab convenience store clerks to death if they are using unrecyclable plastics. The logic in that book, which is that if you believe that your heart is in the right place, it's okay to murder whoever you want, is repeated here. Are Orcus villains? Sure, but unlike the various criminals the X-Men have faced in the past, Orcus hates mutants, which, given that mutants are an analog for today's social causes, means that they are literally worse than Hitler. And even though you have a massive array of powers that incidentally includes resurrection, time travel, and telepathy, that makes you the victim and means that you could absolutely positively murder the shit out of anyone you want. These people hate you, so throw them into a wall with enough force to turn their body into a pulpy soup and then laugh about it. You're the hero. It's okay. Why? Because you said so. How again does this resemble the civil rights movement in any way whatsoever? There are 10 issues in the fall of House of X and Rise of Powers of 10 before we get the Rise from the Ashes era of Brevoort's new status quo. Having lived with Marvel long enough, I have zero expectations that self-awareness will come into play at any point, and Marvel admits where they went wrong, nor do I think Tom is going to somehow dramatically change course. But I suppose like Kitty Pryde used to say before she started phasing people's organs out of their bodies, them's the breaks. Hope springs eternal that we can get some good adventure stories in the future that understand that the message isn't the core of what makes a title great. However, not a lot of hope for that when Tom Brevoort says that is the core of the title. With all this said, it's going to take a lot to bring people back to this book. Overall, this was a bad comic that is a culmination of bad decisions and absolutely terrible characterization. Unfortunately, there really isn't more to be said than that. Thanks for listening.